Hello everyone, and in the second half of our discussion of World War II, we're going to look more at what's going on the home front in the United States. And the first place we're going to start with is how the home front mobilized in order to support the war effort itself. So, what we're seeing happening here is a complete transformation of the role of the federal government with mobilization of the economy. We're going to see a dozen or more wartime federal agencies come into being, including things like the War Production Board, the War Manpower Commission, and the Office of Price Administration, among many other organizations. And these agencies are going to have a wide array of impact on the American economy. So from everything from the allocation of labor to the types and labels of production, these agencies will control the shipping industry, in particular, setting manufacturing quotas. They will build government housing for war workers near the manufacturing plants, convert civilian industries over to war production, and in no place is this more apparent than with the auto plants. Michigan auto manufacturers were now turning out dozens of trucks and tanks for the Army's use. These agencies will also fix wages, prices, and rents for war-related industries. Part of this is to make sure that no one was able to profit fantastically off of the war effort itself. We will see huge efforts at raising public revenue taking place. The gross national product of the United States will rise from $91 billion to a whopping $214 billion by the end of the war. Government spending is twice the national total for government spending over the last 150 years combined as well. And the government will do this by marketing billions of dollars worth of war bonds and increasing taxes. We'll also see the beginning of the practice of withholding income tax directly from people's weekly paychecks. The last place that we'll see major contributions is with the employment rate. The unemployment rate in the United States was sitting at about 14% when the war broke out, and we'll see that drop all the way down to 2% when the war is going on, just because of that need for wartime manufacturing. We'll also see business getting a boost in reputation and image as a result of the war, as people marvel at the efficiency of the American manufacturing sector. A new relationship will form between business and government, with business leaders playing a prominent role in the federal bureaucracy inside these new agencies as well. And federal funding will go to large corporations in support of their efforts on behalf of the war effort itself too. And with all of this interest and funding being sunk into American businesses, we'll also see some pretty impressive achievements, both on the scale of production and on our scientific advances. As far as the scale of production, we will see American manufacturing plants put out thousands of aircraft, hundreds of thousands of armored vehicles, and millions of trucks by the end of the war. And with government funding for research, American companies will produce synthetic rubber, to replace the natural resource, which is now controlled by the Japanese by and large. We'll also see the perfection of technologies like radar, jet engines, and computers. And with jet engines, it's actually really fascinating. If you were to look at the type of planes that we were flying and fighting with in the First World War, which are largely like propeller biplanes, and we look at the type of planes that we're using during the Second World War, which are going to be the first and early iterations of jets, the difference between the two is astonishing. All of these efforts are also going to help restore public esteem for business. Their reputation, which was at an all-time low during the depression, will be boosted considerably by their relationship with the war effort on the home front as well. Now, we will also see this manufacturing boom happening somewhat unevenly across the United States. We will get the revival of some old industrial centers, particularly in the Midwest and places like that. But we're also going to see the creation of some new industrial centers as well, in particular in the West and in the South. The focus of military production in the West will center in places like Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco, with shipyards building naval vessels by and large. Steel plants and aircraft factories will pop up and be predominant in Southern California. In the South, rural migration out of the South, as well as government investment in locating military-related facilities and factories in the South, as well as shipyards, will hasten the shift from an agricultural-dominated economy in the South, which has been the long-standing tradition for the American South, to one that is more industrial-driven in that sense too. And central to all of this is going to be military production. Along with business, we're also going to see a kind of collaboration between the pillars of business, labor, and the federal government, entering into a kind of three-sided arrangement. This will result largely in a surge in union membership. Union membership will grow to unprecedented levels, with 15 million people as part of unions by 1945. We're also going to see the spread of union recognition. The government is forced into a kind of reluctant acknowledgement, and also forcing employers into a reluctant acknowledgement of labor unions. In return, union leaders will promise a no-strike pledge in order to not disrupt wartime production. Now, this isn't a perfectly equal triangular type of an arrangement. We will see some acceptance of employer prerogatives, and particularly things like fair profit. Regulated profit margins will exist in order to counter potential charges of war profiteering, but business is going to have a slightly heavier leg of this agreement than labor will. There is still some reluctance to accept a more prominent role for labor unions. Congress is still going to largely be dominated by a conservative alliance of Republicans and Southern Democrats who will favor business interests over labor ones. We're also going to see, as a part of the war mobilization in Congress, a rolling back of New Deal programs. Eventually, the no-strike pledge is going to be problematic, and despite the existence of the no-strike pledge, we will see some periods of walkouts, protesting the speed of the assembly line production and the disparity between frozen wages and expansion of corporate profits. So while things are a little bit easier, they aren't perfectly harmonious.